After Path of Ascension, one of the most common questions is, what gear do I go after? And with 36 different classes, 15 different gear slots, the answer is impossible to tell you. Based on your playstyle, what your goals are, what gear you've been lucky to get in terms of the rare stuff, it's impossible to give a blanket answer. So instead, I want to teach you how to figure it out here in Questlog. First thing you're going to do, go to questlog.gg. Of course, we're playing Throne and Liberty. Create an account if you don't have one. And then in here, you have character builds. You can go there, you can go here, you can scroll down here. And if you just click on your profile, it'll show you all your current builds. But if we go over to character builds, you can change the server. NCSoft is Korean, so you want global. You can change your class to whatever you're playing. You can type if you're searching there. Of course, there's an actual search bar if you're looking for something specific. The problem is a lot of these are not necessarily going to be good because they're just set to public. Doesn't mean that they put in effort to make it good. They were just toying around. So it can be difficult to actually find a good build. But if you look at the upvotes, there's not a lot of them don't have a lot of upvotes. Like this is a very popular Scorpion build and only has 84. This one has 200, of course. Sometimes even ones with a low amount can be good, but you can definitely browse around. But what you're going to want to do is create a build. Okay? Give it a name. Your role doesn't matter if this is just for you. You know your role. Publisher, you probably want global, and create. Okay? This is what it's going to look like when you start out. The first thing you want to do, go to settings, change the privacy setting from public to either private if you only want it for you, or hidden so you can share it with people with the link, but doesn't show up under character builds with everyone else's. This is the part that most people don't do, and it's highly important to try to keep that clean and just, well, I guess it's not really, if you don't care about sharing your build, whatever, but to keep that clean, I really wish more people did this unless they're trying to make it public. So change that setting there. Okay. Back under the builder, this is where you're going to fill everything out. We'll get to that. If you are trying to build something public, you can add a description here or here. Compare builds is really handy. We'll get into that. Combat simulators for PvP. Don't worry about that. You can take a screenshot and then you get your settings. But the builder is the most important thing. And the first thing you're going to want to do after that, go ahead and fill all of this out with your current gear. It's going to make it much easier to compare and contrast as you're building, especially with the compare builds feature. You can go to your weapon, select your weapon, fill out, once you've got your weapons in place, you can make your skill bar, you can fill out your masteries, fill out your artifacts, and just get everything in place in terms of what you currently have. Then from there, you can clone it, and whatever you put in is here, and then you can start making tweaks. Of course, you can start with the blank slate if you want to, and we'll get into that. But I highly recommend having your current build, keeping it relatively up to date as you make big changes. If you're not making big changes, maybe every couple of weeks, update like rune levels and stuff. But yeah, it's very handy to have your current build, so it's easier to compare and contrast and see, oh, I just got this new gear piece, or if I switch this, how would that do? That kind of a thing. So let's really get into it. I might have to delete this later. That's okay. I have here some PvE DPS templates. To save you time, you can copy these. This will be private, so you can copy this link. I'll of course put it in the description. But let's go through how to actually make your build, your theory craft from here. Okay, so this is your blank slate. Fill that out. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that because I don't need it. I've made 5 different very common DPS combos. As for which one to use, again, it's going to come down to your class, what accessories you have, etc. But let's go through how to actually go through and make your theory craft build. Okay. The first thing, of course, the most important is your weapons. I'm going to skip sword because it's only the tank. So great sword's the first one, and you'll see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 great swords in tier 3. You probably have the Path of Ascension one, but whatever. All right, so I'm just going to start at the top here, a dentist. All right, if I hover over that, sorry, I'm going to read the skill here. A dentist's fury, when attacking with a great sword, increase base damage, blah, 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 blah. All right, that sounds pretty good. Well, then maybe I want this one. I can hover over that and read that and go so on and so forth. Once you pick one, you probably want to do this with all of them just so you understand where they come from. You can click on View in Database to understand where to get it from. Scroll down a bit, and down here is where it tells you where to get it. In this case, it's dropped from NPCs, the Ascended Adentis. If you don't know who he is, he's a world boss or guild boss. If you don't know, I guess it says boss here, so that tells you the probability of dropping. Now, there's 5 different instances. The peace version, be it a guild boss or just a world boss, the probability is always the lower one, so 10%. It's the PvP version that has a higher percent at 30, depending on what event it is. So just know that Adentis has a 10% chance of dropping his greatsword. And then based on your contribution on the world boss for peace, it's a 10% chance, and if he does drop it, and you have a 1% contribution, you have a 1% chance of getting the sword. A little different for guild bosses in that hopefully your guild behaves differently and doesn't just give whoever gets the drop, but actually has like a wishlist system or something so that if you're a greatsword player, you get the greatsword and some scorpion doesn't get it, kind of a thing. There are other ways to get it using lithographs. Oh, this is for your lithograph book. That's not how to get it. Obtain from boxes, convert to perks for your heroic, and we'll look at another weapon that's not a world boss. So, okay, so this is a world boss, so you're probably a little ways out of it. We can look at the next one. You read Will Eruption. Okay, well that sounds pretty good. Let's try that one out. View in Database. Scroll down. Okay, drops from Star and Gulf Lord Commander and Guard Captain. Of course, you can research these. I'll tell you that these are the PvP bosses for the Starlit event. You can craft it with a lithograph, which means you can buy it from the auction house. This is for your lithograph book. Drop from resources. Drops from Butchering Blade. That doesn't make any sense. That's okay. The Starlit chest is the most important one. Starlit chest is only during the Starlit event. You have a 0.25% of a chance of getting it every time you open that chest. You can open the chest twice a day, so it takes like 4 per. So every other day, 1%, and then you need 100, so 200 days chance of getting it. Soon, this will be dropping from the new dungeons here this next week after the update, so you'll be able to see that here. But yeah, so that's your chance of getting it. So that seems fairly low, but it is possible. You can also check because you can craft it. Somebody got it and sold it in the auction house. You can go buy the lithograph and craft it that way. So you go through all of them, read them. Some of them have great skills like Adentis' Fury. Some of them don't. Giant Cordy is an ascended boss, but just go through, learn where to get them all so you know what your highest chances are. In this case, I know that the Lucian Greatsword is easy to get. It comes from Grimtug, Exodus. Okay, well, those are bosses in PvP. You can craft it with, Fortitude coins. Okay, so maybe you go look at that. I will say sometimes this is not accurate because this is for the Korean server, which doesn't always match up with the global server. So if you can't craft it with adventure coins, don't be too surprised. This is your lithograph book. Obtained from boxes. You're not likely to get that. Obtained from dungeons. Oh, okay, so it comes from a bunch of dungeons. Most of these dungeons are actually just your dim trial. Hopefully this is updated after, but the main dungeon it comes from is Fate's Abyss. So if you run Fate's Abyss, you have a good chance of running it, and if you want to see your chances, you can open that up and see that the Lucian Greatsword has a 2% chance of dropping there as well. Okay? And that's pretty common. Most weapons have a little over 2% chance of the dungeon. So that one's going to be a fairly common greatsword. Then the next weapon, whatever you're playing, I'm just going to go daggers because it's next on the list here. In this case, again, you're going to research. This one you'll find out comes from an arch boss. This is the Abyss one from the Starlit, so on and so forth. I'm just going to go with Nerzatomb because just like the Lucian, that is that's the weapon of choice. Okay, so that's how you figure out which weapons and what your chances are. You can, of course, get whatever you want from the auction house relatively. Some of them actually can't be. As a matter of fact, I don't think these two can be taken or bought from the auction house. You can only get them from the dungeon, but that's okay. There are definitely better ones out there. Of course, your best option, no matter what weapon, is going to be the Calanthea one. But as for which Calanthea, which is your heroic, to go for, because you can only have one, It's really going to depend on your class, how it works, what fits best in your build, and if you're multi-classing. In this case, if you're doing Ravager, but then you also play Gladiator, you probably want the Heroic Greatsword, even if maybe the Heroic Daggers are better. I don't know if they are. Don't take that as like advice or anything. I'm just talking in general here. Or maybe if you play Scorpion and Ravager, maybe you want the Heroic Daggers and not the Heroic Greatsword. Okay. Next is your armor and stuff. Now, like I said, in here, you'll be able to copy these. I'll clean it up a little bit. These are your 4 most common, I don't know if most common, but relatively easy to build combinations that are great for PvE on the DPS side. Okay. This first one is the Brute Veiled. So you have 2-piece Brute with the helmet here and the pants there. You have Veiled chest, Veiled boots, and then your gloves are your off-piece, and the best gloves in general for an off-piece is going to be your Flashfire gloves. And that's true with all of these. You'll notice that they all have the Flashfire gloves, and eventually you're probably just going to replace them with the Heroic gloves. Now, there are some classes, like Scorpion, you end up going with a different build most likely to get the best out of it. I can't tell you for your class what is best, but even for Scorpion, if you followed like the Iron Veiled or the Blood Hunter, you're going to perform just fine. It's going to be within margin of error kind of performance differences, okay? So you can copy any of these that you want. On these, I've also highlighted the most important traits. So let's talk about stats and traits real quick, okay? Over here on the right, as a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can read these better now. Over here on the right, I favorited the most important stuff. If you want to favorite something, you can hover over it, hit favorite, and it'll show up at the bottom of your favorites list, and then you can move it around as you want, okay? First and foremost, especially as a new player, survivability is very important. So you want to know what your max health is and your skill damage resistance. Max health, at minimum, I'm going to say 21,000. 22,000 is a good spot too. A lot build up to 24,000, maybe 26, maximum of like 28, depending on your class. And I say that because with the Greatsword, one of its skills, if you know your Greatsword, is you actually want a Adentis, if you get the Adentis one. For that Adentis' Fury, you're going to want 36,000 health. So for that, you're going to want a lot of health. But if you're not playing the Greatsword, not looking for health for damage, just having enough health to survive is really important. So 21,000 is like, if you're below 21,000, build up to it. The next is your skill damage resistance. At minimum, you want 300. If it's lower than that, you've done something wrong. You need to tweak things around, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But skill damage resistance, 300. Okay. After that, the next 3, attack speed, cooldown speed, and buff duration. Attack speed, if you're playing Greatsword Spear, is probably less important. Cooldown speed, if you're playing Staff, is less important. And everything benefits from buff duration. What thresholds to hit here, again, is going to come down to your class. You've got to understand your skills, your mastery, whatever you build out for those, to know what your thresholds are. In general, anything less than 60% of any of these 3 is too low. 80% is generally a good threshold for most classes. And on the high end, you generally are going to reach around 100. Some classes will get higher. Of course, there's a cap. Buff duration and attack speed, the cap is 150%. Cooldown speed is 120%. And then depending on, because that includes your skills. So if you're playing a staff that gives you, I think it's 60% cooldown speed, then after you reach 60% cooldown speed here, you activate high focus, then you're at cap at 120. So anything more is just to get your high focus off. Attack speed, if you're playing Gladiator, kind of the same thing, where you're going to get a lot of attack speed from active skills here and there. So you don't need to build up 150% attack speed base because you're going to reach that anyway. Okay, and that's why different builds, this one has max attack speed, skill damage boost, crit hit chance, or damage rather. This one has the most amount of cooldown speed, that kind of a thing. After survivability, these, you have skill damage boost, at minimal 240. So skill damage resistance, which is survivability, you want 300. Skill damage boost at least 240. If you don't have 240, you've done something wrong somewhere. You need to play around with that. Of course, more is better, but that's the minimum. After that, your crit hit and heavy attack chance are really important. Most people focus on boss because that's what they care about. And that's where a lot of your runes come in. So in this case, because I knew I was going to do double melee, I did the melee. If you're playing magic, you'll replace these with the magic. And if you're playing range, you'll do that. If you've got a mixed class, like say Sentinel with the staff and greatsword, then maybe you'll do both melee and magic and have those. Critical damage, heavy attack damage. Critical damage is generally more efficient, so you're going to want to build more of that. Heavy attack damage is good too. You can build those up. As for how much, there's no minimum because there's too many variables. You could even technically have 0 of either or both of them and be fine. If you really want to get into the math of these and you're critical and heavy and stuff, I highly recommend checking out Aragon's video, How Damage Actually Works. He has a great spreadsheet if you really want to start digging into the numbers and doing the math and comparing your builds that way. Watch this video. He also has a newer video that kind of explains heavy attack damage because that didn't exist yet when this video came out last April, which was almost a year ago now. Wow, that's crazy. But the idea is the same, and his calculator, the spreadsheet's updated with heavy attack damage. The video just doesn't talk about it. But yeah, I highly recommend that if you really want to get into the weeds of doing the math and stuff. After that, a couple of just niceties, debuff duration. So when you get stunned or whatever on you, it wears off faster so you can survive. Really handy in some of the trials. And then stamina, also handy in like the raid and stuff when you have to run around the Roombas or axes or whatever you call the thing that chases you and you have to run around when you're facing Calanthea. And then having enough stamina afterward for the block so you don't die on that. Not critical, just understand where you're at. If it's 0, if any of these, like the stamina regen, if I scroll down, you'll have a lot more stats. Stamina regen won't show up down here because it's 0. So if it doesn't show up in the list at all, it's because you're at 0. It'll still show up in your favorites if you favorited it. That was a weird way to say that. So like debuff duration, if I didn't have any, where's that debuff duration coming from? You can hover over and see. Oh, it's because wisdom hit 44. That's 40. 41, 35. Okay, so now debuff duration is 0. If I scroll down, it's not going to be in this list. Okay, but if I'm on one where I do have debuff duration, if I scroll down, it will be there. And it'll show you. Okay, FYI on that. Trying to think what else. Okay, so there's 2 other pieces I put in here. One is the Hellfire Cloak. For most people, this is going to be the cloak you're going to run with for DPS. Your other options, if you're still running your Path of Ascension, Howling Wind, that attack speed is actually still pretty handy. But once you get the Hellfire Cloak, it is much, much better. For tanks, you can run Shroud of the Prophet, maybe Ultimate Dustbound Shroud, but a lot of that's actually going to be PvP oriented. If you really want a big breakdown of these stats and why they're PvP, and even more so down here, I have a video on that I'll link at the end of the video, down in the description, whatever, you'll find it. Cloak of the Blood Moon, Piercing Ice are both decent, but they're both arch boss drops. Of course, Cloak of the Piercing Ice is your main DPS one. As for whether or not it's better than Hellfire Cloak, kind of, but it kind of comes down to the rest of your build. In general, most people do find this is better, but it's not like it's miles better necessarily. And then Breath of Boundless Sky, up until now, has been nearly impossible to get. It's still going to be really hard to get with the new dungeons, but if you do get that, that's probably your best in slot no matter what. And of course, you can do the Calanthea cloak, but most people in PvE don't because they do the heroic gloves or another heroic piece based on their build, kind of a thing. Okay, so Hellfire Cloak is probably the cloak you're going to run. Flashfire gloves are probably the gloves you want to run until you have the heroic. If you're going with a standard, these 4 pieces is your set piece, and then heroic gloves. Accessories, this is where it varies too much. I did fill out the necklace because most of these necklaces are not going to be useful for PvE DPS unless they're a rare drop. For example, the best one for virtually every class is the Undying Star, but it is a very rare Nebula drop. You can buy it from the auction house, but it's fairly expensive. So there's that one. There's a few others. Necklace of Morning Mist, that's pretty good if you play a magic class especially. The Necklace of Dawn's Light is pretty good, but also only comes from Hall of Illusion. Choker of Godly Inspiration doesn't really help too much compared to Caller of New Moon, but is a lot cheaper. This Blood Crescent's not bad, but again is a very rare Nebula drop, so on and so forth. So you actually can get away with your Death Nail Gorget because of the attack speed. For a long time, there are some classes that will continue to run this and not run the Caller of the New Moon, because that attack speed is worth more than the heavy attack and critical hit chance here. When it comes to your others, there are just so many variables. Your bracelet, there's a lot of good ones. Volcanic Glass Bracelet's pretty common. Endless Breeze, if you can get that, but it comes from a field boss. Bracelet Evening Tide, maybe, but that is a rare Hall of Illusion drop. Your Bracelet of Radiant Chains is the tank one. Sorry, not the one I was thinking of. Binding Wings. That's right. Binding Wings Bracer. That's a pretty common one, but oftentimes will overcap you on dexterity. Some people even run the Binding Life Bracers because of it, even though it gives skill healing over time, which isn't useful for most classes, especially DPS classes, but it still gives you some cooldown speed, and then you're not overcapped on dexterity. Stat-wise, is having your stats lined up is pretty important. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. As for rings, most people run the Band of Brutal Agony, which comes from a field boss or guild boss. And then your other options here, you can run the Starlit one, Twist of Contemplation. It does have ranged heavy attack chance, which may not help your class too much, but the attack speed and cooldown speed is nice. On the flip side, Ring of Ruination, same thing. Attack speed and cooldown speed has strength instead, and then melee heavy attack chance. So you can run that. There's some really good ones that come out of either Nebula or Hall of Illusion. Ring of Repeated Death, Ring of Fractured Growth is a top favorite. But you're going to kind of figure out what fits in best with your build. But like I said, the most common one is Band of Brutal Agony, which comes from a field boss. Your other ring, same idea. Same. Obviously, you can't run the same ring twice. One common cheap one that you can run just for the attack speed is Ring of Profane Coven. That comes out of the Berkant Open Dungeon. And again, if you don't know where these come from and you're curious, click on them, view in database, scroll down, and you'll see this one. You can craft it. You can obtain it from these or drop from the Starlit chest, kind of a thing. Earrings are very much a stat pattern, so you generally will do this kind of towards the end because you're going to try to meet certain thresholds for your stats. So like if your perception is at 74 and you need 6 more perception, you'll probably find earrings with 6 perception. Same with wisdom, dexterity, and so on. Finally, the belt. This one's actually kind of easy. Most people run one of 2 belts, either Belt of Twisted Fate, which comes out of Crimson, has cooldown speed, which is really nice, and perception for the buff duration, or Explosive Mana Girdle, which does not have perception for the buff duration, but has attack speed, which is really nice. So those 2 are the most common PvE DPS belts. Sash of Rustling Leaves is also not bad. It's an arch boss drop, but a fairly common one that has a lot of stats on it. Belt of Dying Spark can be good if stat-wise it lines up better than Belt of Twisted Fate, but for most builds that I've seen, Belt of Twisted Fate has the perception, and you're going to be struggling to get perception, where Dying Spark has wisdom instead. So so those are your main belts, rings, everything. Of course, the brooch is coming. I can't talk about it too much, right? Well, I can tell you my theories on it. We know it's going to come with boss critical or boss heavy, depending on where you're looking. There's an arch boss one with skill damage boost. So your best bet is probably going to be the heavy attack chance if you can get it, and if not, the critical hit chance for whatever class type you're playing. So it doesn't have any like stats and stuff, and then just fill out its traits. So I also filled out the trait here, skill damage boost and buff duration. I thought I filled out more, but that's okay. Your rings are going to have skill damage boost and buff duration. Your earrings, you're probably going to go with max health if you have a health one, or mana and mana regen. You can, of course, do back or side heavy attack. Those are good. That kind of a thing. Then when it comes to your heroic accessory, this is much harder because it really kind of, again, comes down to your build. A lot of people like the bracelet because you can get attack speed as a base, which does mean because you can get 3 stats here, you'd have to give up one of them to get the attack speed, but that can be worth it. The most common one, just because older players built this back during T2 when there weren't as many good rings, have a ring, and they oftentimes just do the 3 strength, wisdom, perception. I don't think there's anything else like even half worthwhile. Maybe cooldown speed. Actually, that could be half worthwhile. But most people just do stats on that. A lot of people, because your earrings are mostly just a stat pattern, will just do earrings with the 3 different stats, especially since it has 10 perception, which is really handy. The one that nobody really does in PvE DPS is the belt, because it does fortitude and damage reduction, both of which are very inefficient in PvE, especially as a DPS player. The necklace, because there are some really good nebula ones, mainly the Undying Star, you probably don't want to do the necklace unless you're doing something specific, but it's not bad. It gives you strength, and you can stat pad it or get attack speed out of it, or cooldown speed, or both even. So you have some options with the necklace, especially if you know you're never going to try to get the Undying Star necklace. So yeah, what you're gonna do, what I would do, I'm gonna zoom out a little bit so that I can see a little bit better, although it might be harder for you, is you can take these PvE DPS templates. I've got 4 of them. You can fill out with what you have, what you think you can get, and play around with these different armor sets to kind of see what fits best, what stats, because when you choose your weapons, right? Oh, let's go back here. In this case, the greatsword came with perception and strength, so those are higher. I can add points in, so let's talk about that. Strength, just about every class, I would say you probably want to get to 50. There are some high tier builds that don't focus on strength at all, because they're playing really hard content where the extra health from strength and defense doesn't really matter, because they're going to die anyway, whether or not they build this up or not, because it just hits really hard. So they focus more on damage and are more of a glass cannon. Dexterity, everyone wants to get to at least 50 for the movement speed, and otherwise more is better. Wisdom, everyone wants to get to 50 for the cooldown speed, more is better. More importantly for wisdom, the even numbers will increase your cooldown speed. So right now I'm at 44, my cooldown speed's at 40. If I go to 45, my cooldown speed stayed at 40. If I go to 46, it goes up to 40.5. So your wisdom, you want to try to get to at least a even number, no matter where you land, so that you get the most amount of cooldown speed. If you're at an odd number, you're losing out on cooldown speed. So you can either add another one maybe, or subtract one and add it to like perception. Every point of perception gives you buff duration. In this case, I'm at 38. I add, I'm at 38.5. I add another, I'm at 44, because 40 is the threshold to get 5 more. So get at least 40 perception to get your buff duration up. If I bring this back down, it shows you that. Fortitude, in PvE, it's not super handy with the stuff it gives you. If you need to be more tanky or more survivable, getting it to 40 for the magic defense can be nice. Otherwise, the only thing it really does for you, especially as a DPS, is it still increases your base damage. So you can take it, like when you get your gloves, your heroic gloves. Most people still take the fortitude because there's not another option, just for more base damage. But otherwise, it's not particularly handy. Unless you're looking to be a little more survivable, then building it up to 40 is not a bad threshold. Flash Fire is generally the best, but you do have 2 other options that are alright. Brute Slayer Handguards, is okay. It does have strength, so depending on your class, that might be more beneficial. The bonus damage, though, like I said, check out my video for PvE stats, but bonus damage isn't too terribly handy. At least it works, it's just not super great. And then your other one, which is super cheap, is the Valiant Grips of the Resistance. That critical hit chance versus heavy attack. Heavy attack's generally going to be worth more, but maybe if the strength is worth more than the wisdom, and these are really easy to get because they come out of the Berkant open dungeon, so they're super cheap. But otherwise, the most common favorite is the Flash Fire. One thing you'll also notice is I very rarely will actually focus on Archboss. So in this case, the best gloves is actually your Veiled Concord gloves. However, they're an arch boss drop, which means they're super expensive and very difficult to get. So I never worry about arch boss. And if I ever happen to get it, then great, I'll grab it. Or if I learn that it's a drastic difference, such as like the Tab Orb or Tab Wand, maybe I'll grab it, depending on like costs and stuff. But for the most part, I just ignore arch boss stuff because I know that the chances of me getting it are very slim. Of course, if you're playing differently than me, maybe you do get arch boss stuff or you buy arch boss stuff, whatever, then you can build around those. But I always skip them because I know the chances of me getting it are next to nothing. Same with weapons. I never focus on arch boss weapons with any of my builds. And if I ever happen to get one, then cool. But it's not really a common thing. So let's see. Skills, definitely. The most important thing with your skills, you can build out your actual skill bar here, but there's nothing that Questlog will calculate from that really matters. So it's kind of irrelevant unless you're like playing around and learning skills or whatever. However, your passives, it will calculate. So if you have a passive like this one, which it increases your skill damage boost, you'll want to put that into place so you can see your skill damage boost over here. Let's see. If I don't have it, let's just get rid of it. Skill damage boost is currently 160. If I add that and save, you can rename it, by the way. You probably should, but now my skill damage boost is 187. So it does calculate from your passives. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and delete these real quick. Mastery, you probably want to fill out as well for a few reasons. Why? What is happening? It should have defaulted to Dagger Greatsword. Okay. Let's go over to the dagger. So in here, there's a few things. Some things won't calculate, such as this Bloodseeker is supposed to reduce critical damage by 5%. It's actually 7%. It's a typo, I think. But Questlog won't calculate that. However, it will calculate things such as this buff duration at 2%, this attack speed at 2%, and so on. So you still want to fill out your weapon mastery, but which node it selects, for the most part, there are a few I think that do calculate, but in my experience, most of them don't calculate, so I don't worry about it too much. So if you've got, let's see if I can build an example here. In this case, this one and this one are selected, so it could go here, or it could go here. In this case, I lucked out. It's the one that I tend to run anyway. But in Questlog, you don't have to worry about it too much because it's not going to really calculate it. But obviously in game, you're going to want to activate the nodes that you want, kind of a thing. But each node here is important, but the passives are less important. One that it does calculate is down here, your overall weapon mastery. Of course, everyone tries to get to potential, which you need to get to 520 weapon mastery levels, because that increases all of your attributes by 1. So that's a good one to put in. The rest of them, I don't think there's anything that Questlog calculates, not that I know of at least. So as long as you have that one in, the other 3 are just, you can put in whatever, unless you're like trying to help somebody know what to run, or you're just trying to keep track of it for yourself, kind of thing. But there's nothing to calculate in Questlog. Artifacts, let's talk about that. For DPS, most people run 4-piece Chaos Harbinger. That one, and this is calculated over here. So you'll want to fill up your Chaos Harbinger. Most people don't worry too much about these too much. There are a few that are handy, and if you want to focus on them, especially now that you can upgrade them. So let's talk about like what stats a little bit. Of course, check out my video that breaks all the stats down. But from your top left, the most important is max damage. And then most people want heavy attack chance of whatever type. So in this case, I'm melee. And then if I'm a single type, I do the other heavy attack that's general. If I've got 2 different, maybe I'll do like magic melee. Maybe I still do the base, but heavy attack chance is the other. Now, technically, it is better for species damage boost. So like undead is the most prevalent. So undead damage boost is technically better, but only against that type. So you can save several different pieces and switch it out if you want. Most people don't bother with it because it's too tedious. But the most important one is here is max damage. And then if you can get heavy attack chance, that's your better bet. Okay. The top right, Defensive wise, again, same thing. Species damage resistance is really important if you're focused on that, but it's really tedious, so most people don't. Defense is generally a good option. Just get your 3 defenses. Evasion is good for open dungeon mobs and even mobs leading up to the boss, but against the boss is less useful. So most people just focus on defense, secondary evasion, maybe endurance. But yeah, like I said, check out my video for more on this stuff. But this one's kind of the least impactful as a DPS necessarily, but okay, no more on that. Here, you actually get different main stats. So for damage, depending on your class, you're going to want max damage or base damage. If you want more survivability, max health, especially in the early game when you're trying to get your max health up into the 20,000s, 21,000 or more, you might go for max health, but otherwise max damage if you crit a lot and that's your class, maybe base damage if you work on curses. Again, you can use the calculator to really dig in if you want. Otherwise, down here, it's the same in terms of you've got your heavy attack chances and your base heavy attack chance. If you want more survivability, it does have some evasions. But that's about it here. Okay. And then the bottom left, depending again on your class, you might want the mana regen if you chug through mana, maybe max mana. But otherwise, this is where you can get a lot of your stamina is going to come from here. So you might focus on stamina from here, and then either max mana or mana regen otherwise. So that's your main focus there. As for your solar and lunar stone, the most preferred setup is the Abyssal Beast. As for these stats, you can get some CC resistances, but as for which ones, maybe stun, maybe general, maybe silence if you're magic, maybe weaken, but they're kind of pointless. Otherwise, you can do species damage resistance. And then as for here, the best setup is generally actually your Plains Ravager, which increases your base damage by 22 for 10 seconds, which is really big. If you don't have that, you can go more survivable with Ancestral Armor. You can go with Chaos Harbinger for more crit hit chance, which is a little bit of extra damage. You can get some survivability from Wildlands, but no, most people end up running either the Plains Ravager, Ancestral Armor for defense, or Chaos Harbinger. They're going for that. The 6-piece Chaos Harbinger does give you more crit hit chance, which is nice too, so that's not too bad. If you don't use a control skill, so you don't trigger Abyssal Beast's effect, which is increasing your base damage when you use a control skill, again, Ancestral Armor is not bad, especially if you want to do 2-piece here, so do that one and Ancestral Armor here. That'll give you an extra 1500 max health, which is handy for building that up. And then when your base damage, or when your health is low, your base damage increases, which can be handy in certain situations, especially if your damage helps heal you. And then this one just is basically a 5,000 potion, but also increases your max health. So if it's a preemptive, so it's kind of a shield in a way, so that's not bad. So yeah, that's all about artifacts. Mastery skills, again, you're going to fill out your gear. You can play around with these different templates for different stuff. I will tell you, if you hung out this long, you get a little treat here. For Crucifix, it has been tested enough that I'm confident to say that the full 4-piece Veiled Concord set is your best option with the Heroic Gloves. Of course, if you have Archboss Veiled Concord Gloves, you wouldn't go that route. But like I said, I don't focus on Archboss stuff. If you play Invocator, the 4-piece Blood Hunter is your best. Veiled Concord does come kind of close. But because you already have so much skill damage boost from your passives, your Blood Hunter set tends to outperform, maybe not so much on the dummy, but when everything else is added up, when you're like in a party and stuff, your 4-piece Blood Hunter is generally your best bet. Every other class, everyone kind of benefits from the Blood Hunter. If you don't play Wand, Staff, or Greatsword, Veiled Concord is very powerful because you don't get passive skill damage boost. A cheaper, possibly, way that gives you max attack speed is this combo with the Errant Scion instead. And if you're looking for more heavy attack or more cooldown, you can do the Brute Slayer, which also might have more survivability because you get strength. This is the one, strength and max health. Let's do the compare real quick. So let's go ahead and clear these weapons. Over here, you have your compare builds. So if I want to compare the Brute Veiled max cooldown versus the max heavy, you have all your favorites here, and it shows you the difference. So if you wanted to tweak a piece or whatever, or just check 2 different builds, you can see the differences. So this one has more crit damage, more heavy attack damage. This one has more heavy attack chance, but this one has more cooldown buff duration. So it looks like at the surface, this one will do more damage, at least for this setup. Although that is because I have the ring. I should clear that too. I thought that was a little lopsided. Okay, so again, like a tweak like that, say I do have Band of Brutal Agony over here, and I have Ring of Forbidden Lusher, then I can check, okay, well, this one has more crit damage still, more heavy attack damage, and of course that's because the armor sets are different, but yeah, you can do comparisons to kind of see what's going to fit better, especially if you're using the spreadsheet and want to bust out the math, that kind of a thing. Oh, I also had points set in here. Let's take those off. That helps as well. Oh, runes. Okay, so we'll use the necklace, for example. You can fill out your runes. So let's go with Wisdom Max Health. You can select whatever one you're running with or what you want to and play around with that. Change the level for your current rune level. If you have Chaos, you can go to the Chaos rune, either a Noble or a Precious. And then you're going to select the good benefit, the benefit of it, the good part. So in this case, let's just say it's max health. It does not have a slot for the negative aspect of your Chaos runes. So why, I'm not sure, but I presume it's just because it's not really worth it, because most of the time, hopefully it's either very minimal or something that doesn't matter to you. So for your Chaos runes, just pick what you have in terms of the benefit and don't worry about the negative. And then it should default to Noble, but you can change the level down to, like, if you're a newer player, that's probably level 60. Probably not running healing. You might be running, in this case, maybe Amateur healing, maybe healing received, maybe stun resistance, I don't know. But set your rune levels to get a better idea of where you're at, kind of a thing. I'm going to go and clear those. Yeah, it does also have food, if you want to put food in just to see where it's at. A lot of people who are trying to help, like with a build, they'll put in the food just so that you know what food is best for you. I don't normally worry about that too much. You can also do like your rift stones if your guild owns a rift stone or a boon stone, or if you own the castle, and you can add in stellarite to see how much that affects things as well. So you've got others down here. They're less impactful unless you're like really trying to min-max or check where you're at, that kind of a thing. But I never personally worry about that in quest log so much. Yeah, hopefully, I know this is long. We're coming up on 45 minutes, but hopefully you've learned a lot, and now you can craft your build, check your stats, see where you're at, and this is really helpful. I know this was really, really, really long, so hopefully it helps out, but that's all I've got.